New topic.
It's a great way.
Yeah. Talk about self-care.
You hate that word.
I hate that word.
Do you want to make up another word?
Well, we throw it around a lot in our cultural dialogue.
This is true.
It is a terrible.
Yeah.
As a man, like we were talking about this earlier. I'm a man. I can handle it.
Yeah.
I'll be okay.
Yeah.
I don't need self-care.
Yeah.
But you do.
So for me, it was helpful to reframe that whole idea of if you're a cup, you have a limit to what is in your cup. And the more that you are able to put into the cup, the better and more effective I'll be to pour out for my son who needs it, for my wife, and for the rest of my family. So if you think about it that way, that really helped me process through decision making practically and spiritually of if this isn't a net gain for me, because what we're going through is taking everything and more of what I have.
Was there something or somebody to help show you that? Like to could be like, okay, like it's go time.
No.
Jason was huge. Maybe not for you. That was probably more me.
It was probably more for me. It was I was hitting a wall much quicker than I was used to.
Yeah.
And it was a survival thing for me of I'm not going to make it if I keep participating in things that are taking something from me that I don't have anything that I don't have to give, because I didn't have enough for my son and my family, but for sure I couldn't participate in anything that was taking something from me outside of that.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think even other people that like our self-care probably was different because for you, the biggest thing was, I mean, even outside of our whole lives at home, like you really narrowed down on like, hey, these things are helpful for me. And they were good escapes, good places to be with other people, other friends and other stuff. But then there were places along the way that you were just like, I can't do that.
Right. So.
And that was different kind of than my journey.
What's disorienting is when Abram was diagnosed, I'm 36 years old. I've been a Christian for most of all my adult life. And I had these rhythms and routines of what was helpful for me. And then I get into the situation with we're caring for our son. And all of a sudden, these rhythms I have in place that I've known aren't working, and even hurting in some ways, which really threw me. And I didn't know what to do with that. But as a survival technique, I just started cutting stuff out, and it really helped. And then targeting things like, oh, that was actually really, really good for me to go out and sweat for a couple hours playing pickleball, where my brain is just devoid of anything hospital or care. That was really helpful. But
what are the things, like for you personally, obviously, right? You're not advocating for the whole world, but like what were the things that when all that happened, you started walking through all this and you're like, this kind of scaffolding, while was good before and helpful and necessary, is no longer beneficial for the journey we're about to go on? Like what are the things that started to kind of naturally go? And I know those things are filled with faces and people we can get in all that, but like, what are the things you started to kind of naturally, just instinctually dispensing with? Like, we can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore.
And hang on. Yeah, that's a great question. And we do need to but there was also, it was, you were seeing two, I thought you were seeing two separate counselors at the time that kind of helped you. One of them was a counselor and a pastor, Jason Holloman. Yeah. And then there was, I thought you were seeing Greg too, or somebody else. Yeah. It was like, hey, let's try to recognize what these things are. And then it was Greg too that helped him out.
Yeah, because so Greg walked alongside us before Abram was ever sick, and he was awesome. Like we had done a lot of marriage counseling with him over the years, and everyone, I think marriage counseling is the best thing ever. And we had started our first year of marriage because we were like, hey, we need this. And I think we have a strong marriage, but we needed some counseling. So he had kind of been walking with us before. And then Jason was awesome because we were both involved at recovery at our church, and Jason and Mari at the time, like both really came in, and especially Jason. I mean, like entering in. So we kind of had people speaking in.
Yeah. So
From
talk
the
about
get-go.
like how you, his question is awesome. Who helped you? How did you discover those, and what were those things, and what did you do with them?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
once we're diagnosed, everything's falling apart, and we get connected to Jason because we go to the village church, and it's a huge church. But he was our point man, our pastoral care.
We had done life with him, and we
were in recovery,
really
and he
pastored us through.
He led the recovery ministry,
Yeah.
so that was a natural connection.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Jason's extremely gifted in this space, fortunately for us. But he quickly was pushing on us, even 5 days in diagnosis of.
The first time he came into the hospital.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you're telling me to do things. Like, okay.
Yeah. He was getting after you to just go on a walk, get outside.
We should finish yours first.
I like that. But
There's a lot of stuff to me.
I will say though, just those terrible spaces of going to hospitals on bad news, like that's something Jason has done a bunch of.
Yeah.
So there's an awareness that he had of, you're buckle up. You're about to. This is a marathon. This is not.
It's not a sprint. That's
right.
I remember him saying that exact
Right.
thing.
Because as the parent, you're like, whatever it takes, you're all in, and just him walking through some of that previously, he knew we're not built to sustain that, and we're not. I can testify to that.
Yeah.
Despite our best efforts, we can't sustain that to the level we'll crash and we'll burn.
And we did.
And we did. And because the crash and the burn is what can be harmful in a family or even in the care of Abram.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want is to take anything away from him or the rest of your family. And so
everyone's in trauma. Yeah. So when you do that, it's detrimental.
So again,
detrimental to everyone.
circling back to the idea of self-care, what you're fighting for is to not crash out and burn up and have those harmful overflows to your family hit you like that. And that was something he was wise to, and that was helpful to hear.
Very helpful.
Okay, and so you're talking to him or talking to Greg too, and like,
yeah, both.
You're discovering those things. How did you discover those in those meetings with him? What were they? What did you? Because they changed, like you'd already alluded to. They changed for you.
They did.
Like you were doing things that were super helpful for you, and then all of a sudden they're not helpful, and your world's flipped upside down, and you're like, so what were they? What did that look like?
Because they changed quicker for you than for me.
Yeah. I was getting exhausted very quickly trying to like bring someone up to speed with. So if I had to regurgitate anything of what was going on, very quickly I was like, if that's what I have to do to maintain this relationship, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I needed safe places of people that I trusted to be with. I needed somewhere to be, but it had to be safe and not.
So what did that look like practically then? What did you have to do?
Well, so this is
in all
COVID.
that? 'Cause you're talking about people at this point.
Yeah,
and who to be around a lot and who to not be around.
So
moving forward.
We're starting in regiments of weeks on and off to hospital stay, but this is also during the height of the pandemic. So interacting with people was not. There wasn't a normative thing for anything. So
to some degree, I think that was still a gift. Like of all the things, all of that was so freaking hard. But I will say it was so nice being able to tell my son, not that we're not hanging out with people because his immune's compromised, his whole system, but it's
COVID.
It's COVID.
Yeah.
And I do think there was I would never choose it. I would still have chosen, there's so much that I think we missed out on because of that. The cost was way greater than anything we gained, but I did appreciate that aspect where it was exhausting to be around a lot of people. It was exhausting to do stuff, and it's a really easy way to not put it on. At least for me, that was probably more me than you, though. I kind of hijacked that.
You did, but it's okay. Because for me, it was I needed to be around people, but they had to be safe
Mhm.
and trustworthy. And, one of the things I would get a lot was like, hey, if you ever need to talk, uh, I hated hearing that. I don't want to talk more about how my son has cancer. I don't. I want to go somewhere and escape and breathe. Because between Ashley and I, all we're doing is talking about how we're dealing with Abram, what's going on with him, what's the next step.
Yeah, so like, and you're spot on, but I remember specifically like I thought it was with Greg, and you're sitting with him, and he's like, I need you to specifically name like, and I don't, but like, what is it in the spots that like you don't feel like, oh well, I don't want to talk anymore, or I don't want to do this. It was like, this is what fills or takes my cup to empty, so then I can go put more in it.
Yeah, no,
It was Greg.
You're right. So I with the counselor, Greg, and he asked, because I was telling him the same thing. I felt disoriented of these things used to be really good and helpful,
Yeah.
and this is not. And so then he just asked me plainly, like, well, name the 3 things that fill your cup. And I just named 3 things. He's like, do all 3 of those.
Well, almost
Yeah.
definitely
What were
pickleball.
they?
I don't remember if it was
It had to
pickleball.
be.
So one thing Joey did was he cleared out his back porch. He said, hey, every Thursday, I don't need you to tell me if you're coming or not coming, but it's just going to be there. And if you need to come somewhere to be, we're going to watch football or Charles Barkley on TNT, something. And Joey created space where if I wanted to talk about things, but pretty quickly I realized like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, it's just not helpful for me to relive more of this nightmare.
That's all we did.
And
So to have moments where you could feel normal was something that was huge.
Yep.
For both of us.
You could escape
Differently.
and
In a
escape
healthy-
in the best possible way.
In a healthy way,
Escape's
'cause
not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah.
I think we use that word now, like especially in
For
Christian
sure.
culture, I do think it can often be like, oh, that's a bad thing. And it can be.
Yeah, you're running away from
Yes.
something you need to be dealing with. But in
But
this
there's an
particular instance,
aspect
it was like,
you needed that. Like
call
I
it
needed that.
whatever
We
you want to
needed
call
that.
it, taking a break,
Yeah.
whatever kind of thing. But you need to just not have to be something for a
You
little
feel
bit.
Yeah.
human for a minute.
We needed to do date nights, which we
That
were
was-
That was one of the things I was thinking of. Yeah.
we were privileged in that because we had so much great grandparent help. When they would come up, we'd say, hey, can you hang out for another day or whatever?
Yep.
And we can go on a date night.
And we did it almost every week. And it was
Amazing. Because
the best thing. Even when he was, I mean, that's the crazy thing. Even when he was on hospice, I remember nurses being floored that like we're at the hospital and we literally would have, because at this point we could have more people up, even though most people couldn't. And so we'd have like a grandma staying and we'd go somewhere literally close to the hospital and just get away. And that was actually one of the things I think Jason had advised at that point. Like, but I needed a moment to just be with my husband. And it was just grounding and like to not, I just removed from all the.
And get outside of
Yeah.
the hospital walls. As hard as that was with Abram,
It was very hard to do.
leaving him behind, because as
That's
great
fine.
as our grandparents were, there were times where things just didn't go the way that they would have if we would have been there. And so that little bit of control, that's
Yeah.
hard to give up on.
Yep.
But it was worth fighting.
Because we kept fighting for our marriage during it. Like that was part of the self-care, I guess.
Yeah. And then, so, come back to, the pickleball deal. To me, that was huge. It gave me an opportunity to escape and sweat and like to keep a workout routine during all this was not possible for me because the schedule was always so bonkers. But just a little endorphin release, sweat. I mean, I even had friends and family that would come to the hospital and we would pull tape on top of the parking garage and made a pickleball court.
And Abram could watch you.
Yeah. He didn't really care. But
Nah, he would go look and be like, oh, that's cool. And he'd go,
But that way, I didn't, where we live was about 30, 35 minutes from the hospital. So I didn't have to go somewhere and do that. I was able to accomplish that right there. And I mean, it was no magic bullet. Like I wasn't all better after that, but just these helpful things of, pouring into me where I would have something to pour back out of.
The other one was your dad.
Yeah.
Yep.
I forgot about that. That was.
Yeah. So my dad.
Which caught you off guard, but it was probably the biggest.
Yeah, my dad was so. I mean, he's always been my hero, and I don't know. There's a level of suffering he endured watching me as his son suffer, which I get that in that I was suffering watching my son suffer. So he, at least around me and us, completely put whatever he was dealing with in that aside just to take care of me. And so
I think both our parents, like, I think they suffered a lot, and yet what we were given for the most part, like, was
I'm not shortchanging my mom or your
Yeah.
parents at all, but
it was different.
for me specifically, when my dad would hug me, like, because normally you go in for a hug and whatever, and it's like a half a second, and then
Not with your family.
and
It's long hugs.
but he would literally just not let me go, and almost every time I'd just start crying, and just to be held in his strength for that short period of time was because as the dad, you're trying to hold it all together and on your
Yeah.
shoulders, and I was committed to doing that, but just to have those brief just reprieves where I'm in his strength, and
Someone's holding you.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that was so awesome, and I'll be forever grateful for that.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of times when my mom would come up for the hospital stuff, and I would always be like, "Dad, can you come too?" And I needed to tell him that, so he felt needed, and because they've got a
He
house.
was needed. He needed to hear that he was needed, probably.
Right, and because they've got a house 3 hours away and stuff to take care of, but it was sometimes as the person in it, you do have to use your words and articulate what you need.
It's hard to do.
It's really hard to do that, but it's needed, and we got better at it as we went.
We were really bad at the beginning.
But as people are always offering, and finally we got better at saying, "I need this."
Yeah.
If you can't do that, that's okay, but this is what I need if you're offering.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the beginning, I mean, I was so overwhelmed by how much people wanted to do stuff, and I at least the way I'm wired, maybe less, like, you're better at that probably than I am, but the way I'm wired is very much like I am self-sufficient. Like, I don't want help from anyone. Like, I'm going to show that I can do this, and like, there's a pride aspect there, and so your whole world's reoriented, where it's just like, no, like, this is actually how the body of Christ is designed to be. Like, these people are offering help, and so learning to accept that. And I think we're both, even to this day, a lot better at that. Like, that's not as hard at saying what we need. Maybe a little.
We've gotten a lot better at it.
Yeah.
So talk about even Holloman coming to the hospital and be like, "Hey, you should shower and go for a walk." Like talk to like that blew your mind.
So my self-care was different than yours. Like, we definitely had very different stories. So for me, I mean, it was very practical things. I mean, it was taking a shower, like Holloman's big thing. And he annoyed the hell out of me, honestly, like, because he was constantly like texting, like, "Hey, did you take a walk today?" Like, his challenge for me was like getting out of that room. Because, the last thing a mom wants to do at that moment is like to leave her son. But there was moments where I wasn't even me listening to Holloman. It was literally my husband making me. But like, I remember that first week we were in the hospital before we ever had gone home. Like, the first time I left the room, just going downstairs, and Children's was being remodeled at this time, but I'm like going to this little area that I wasn't supposed to be in. Funny story, literally got locked out, had to walk around. It was a whole disaster. Was not supposed to end up where I did, but I got outside and just was able, it was the first time I put my earpods in. I don't think I had earpods in, but I had, the old fashioned kind, and I'm listening to music, and it was just this moment with me and the Lord of just, and it was the song Waymaker. And like, I just remember it was my first moment outside of the room with Abram, where I was like, I mean, literally just meeting with the Lord, but I had no intention of doing that. If someone would not have made me do that, there was no way I was going to leave my son. Like,
Sure.
all I wanted to do was lay next to him and hold him. which is what I did most of the time. And that was great too. Like that wasn't bad, but I was so challenged in that was a healthy thing. And it was a healthy thing. I would love to say the story that I did that well all the time, but that is not true, especially when I did it better when Jack could be at the hospital, because it was a lot easier to leave Abram in Jack's care. It was really hard, especially when they went to sole caregiver. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that changed that was outside of my control that I was not very keen on leaving. And so I didn't do that well. And the truth, I think, of most of my story when Abram was at the hospital is I did not do self-care well. I think the best thing for me, at least, was date nights. That was something we talked about early. And I think that was something we both had in common. And it's something we tried hard to do. And it was easier for me to do that because Jack was safe and an escape. But like, I mean, showers for me were really hard. I know and I will tell you, even on the side of grief, they're hard. Like I go through grief comes in waves. And that's a whole nother podcast for a later time. But like, there's weeks where I do pretty well. And then there's weeks where I'm like, seeing my counselor, and I'm like, I think it's been like 3 or 4 days since I've taken a full shower. And that's a lot of information for some of y'all. But like, that really is like, that's sometimes where I'm at. And that was a lot of the hospital. And it started probably a little bit before that. I mean, if we're being completely honest, we had 4 kids in 4 years. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was acing life before that, but it took a hard turn in the just basic things that I really would feel better. Like when I did a walk, when I did a shower, when I did these things for me. And yet it was the last thing I wanted to do because it was hard. It was hard. Like everything felt hard. Things that shouldn't feel hard.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was figuring out a lot of that.
Yeah. And so thinking back to that point, I'm giving yourself permission to just, as simple as it is this good? Then do it. If this is not good, don't do it.
Yeah.
But that comes at the cost of relationships.
Yep.
That you've had for years. Could be family, could be all these other things that just they're hitting you in the face of like, this doesn't seem right. So then I feel bad. I'm like, this isn't right. But at the same time, I'm seeing my limitations, and I'm like, I just can't do it. I can't proceed here. And so meeting with Greg it was like I needed someone to give me permission.
Totally, I remember that.
To do those things and to fight for those things. Like, hey, prioritize these things. If something else pops up, great, but go after those things.
Yeah.
And just keep it at that. But I really needed to hear that because I kept, like I said, I was just disoriented, discombobulated of, well, maybe if I keep trying, maybe I'm not doing it right, but this has been good for so long and it just wasn't. And
yeah, you're having to start almost a new life.
Yeah.
yes.
And the pressure is to maintain the previous life.
And it will never
and it's
be
all
that.
happening as it happens. And so it's like, you don't even know what's going on kind of thing. And then before you know it, it's unsustainable. And the reason is because you cannot live 2 lives. You're having to literally shift into a whole new realm of reality as a family and as people, survival.
Yeah. And there is aftermath of it. Like that. I mean, like there was repercussions from those things that were hard, but at the same time, like you got there so much quicker than I did. And I sometimes wish I would have gotten there quicker because it really took me till he was like on hospice, like to really be like I just wanted to be it all during it. Like I wanted to be everything for Abram and I wanted to still do all my same life things. And then we have COVID in the mix. So it's like, it's a messy thing. And I was exhausting myself trying to do things. And I mean, so much fell through the cracks, but at the same time, I think there's a freedom there and it shouldn't be this guilt and weight. And you got there a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And there was repercussions though. Like
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
still now
relationships that we
I was
lost.
going to say still now to where even like a couple of weeks ago, we're talking, you're like, oh, is that like, I don't have to carry it. Like you were still carrying that guilt and shame. And you're like, oh, if that's really what happened, like, I don't have to carry that.
Yes,
like,
exactly that.
Yeah.
Right. You don't even fully process it. Even now we're still processing some of that. And it is hard. Like I hate the damage
Sure.
of so many aspects. I mean, there's family stuff, there's friend stuff, relationships. Every single person that intimately walked with us was affected in good ways and bad ways. And I don't think that will ever change. And I don't have any belief that we've done things perfectly. And yet at the same time, just having this freedom to be okay that we did the best we could with where we're at.
Sure.
And we're continuing to try to do that.
Yep.
And our best will never have been enough, but it was our best. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So.
We're happy to apologize. Like, yeah, we wish we could do it better, but candidly, we just say, well, this is the best we have. And we're sorry if we hurt your feelings and didn't come through on some things, but we had to pick our son, we had to pick our family, and
our immediate, that was the end goal.
There were consequences to that.
Totally.
But the interesting part was, the safe places surprised me, because not everybody was. But
you had more of that too than I did.
I did.
You were my safe place.
I was willing to, I had some friends that I'd known for years, but then occasionally I'd stumble across someone who really had suffered. It didn't have to be cancer, but it could have been. And it's like when you
it still happens now.
Yeah,
it does. Because if someone has really suffered, you can say so much with saying so few words.
It's always better.
Which is so helpful, because I can say just one sentence to Vince Dang, and that communicates.
They also lost their son to cancer.
Vince and Katie went through a similar thing as us.
They were huge.
They were about a year and a half before.
What I was thinking about now, like Rob, like you mean that came out of nowhere, and you're like, oh man, this is
that's right. But we can get to a place of just authentic, no bullshit. Just like this is where we are, candidly, and not trying to pretty that up in any way. Because
there's a pressure to do that.
Well,
we felt that.
So part of cutting the fat of self-care was just the exhausting trying to be prettied up, cleaned up, pretty quickly, that I didn't want to hear I'm praying for you, God's got a plan. I just didn't want to hear any of that shit. And that's what it is.
Not even that's not true. It is really hurtful though in those areas where the rug got pulled out for us to hear those things. And I will tell you right now, I believe God had a plan. I genuinely believe that statement in and of itself is not an untrue statement. But for me, it was so painful it felt like an empty platitude, I'm trying to make myself feel better and I say this with so much grace of there were people that I think that's the quickest thing we realize is people could say that. And there were certain people that could say that I'm you're absolutely praying for me. I know you are behind me. You are in my corner. And then there was this group that was I think you're just saying this because you don't know what else to say and you feel uncomfortable. And that's hard. And I personally do not have a lot of that is not something I sit there and struggle with. Because for me, I'm I appreciated that I was thought about. But at the same time, I would just in general, even if someone's listening to this that isn't necessarily walking through child cancer or someone's suffering, but knows someone else that's suffering, there's so much more to be said about just being with the person in the moment. And sometimes I will tell you to this day, if I'm walking with someone, the first thing I say is hey, that really sucks. Because sometimes that was the most comforting place for me is someone just being hey, I'm here and this really sucks. This is not there's not a.
I think too much we drive to the happy ending where that's not there. You need to sit in this sucks, and that's the appropriate answer.
And that's hard for our culture, specifically American Christian culture. That is hard to sit in.
It's interesting, something that, and we've talked about this particular subject a ton off this space kind of thing. And the thing that jumps out to me in this moment, which is different than all the other moments we've talked about this, is there's probably an expectation or a pressure that you guys probably felt by the culture, let's just say, whatever it is kind of thing, to package this in a certain kind of way that gave other people hope, right? Because they're watching and they're weak and they're feeble and they're looking to fill their faith just like as much as anybody else is kind of thing. And to watch people talk about something a certain kind of way is like, oh man, look at that, and the fact that maybe you guys weren't doing that or just, I don't know. I'm just saying there's a pressure in all that to put this thing in a certain kind of way that it just simply wasn't, and it's not that it couldn't be that way, but it wasn't that way.
That's right.
And so if it was that way, you guys would have talked about it like that. And there are
And
stories
we had
like
moments, but
Well, it wasn't that I was, or that we were ever devoid of hope.
Yeah.
Our hope was
For sure.
in the Lord. And I never, and still not, I'm not punting on that. However, to tell me this is really bad, but God's going to do something, like, well, I'm in just the throes of being scared to death that I'm going to lose my child. I'm not sleeping. Our schedule's bananas. Like we're just in this crazy. I'm being asked to make decisions that I'm incapable of making, but I have to make
you're
them
not
anyway.
supposed to have to make them.
You're not. But and so when we try and get to the redemptive part of the story, or the before we're there, it's really unloving. It's hurtful. Like to this day, if I hear kind of these cliche, you know, like I said, God's got a plan, or He works all. I mean, that's scripture. He works all things out for His good. But it
might not be the right one
It makes
in
me
that
want to
moment.
fight. I want to hit you in the face.
Yeah.
Well,
because it's said in the wrong context,
Yes.
right? And so those things ought to be
Yes.
said in certain moments of life, and
even
in that
biblically how they're
particular-
written, like it's taken out of context.
You're saying them inappropriately. It'd be like using a flagrant language or something
Mhm.
like that. It's like you don't know what you're saying, kind of thing. You need to not talk at all.
yeah. The best and safest places where I just got to be, or if there was someone who had suffered similarly, that I could hang out in that space of just, there was an understanding, and but that didn't look like us talking about every bit and piece of it. but
Presence.
No.
it was a
Yeah.
presence, and just
God, yeah.
just like, with, I remember sitting with Mike Jones in my front yard, and he's
Yeah.
talking about his daughter's cancer battle, and I felt so privileged, and so it was so helpful for me to hear that.
It was a daddy's perspective.
It was a daddy's perspective, and a lot of the stuff he felt and went through,
Mm.
I was feeling it, but I didn't have either words to articulate those things, but I had those feelings, and it, like again, it wasn't like all better, but it just helped my soul just kind of relax a little bit, and like, okay, like, here's a man I trust and love, and he loves me, and we're in a similar place. And that was comforting. That it did offer comfort in those
You're not
moments.
alone in that moment.
Not alone.
Someone's
Yes.
with you. Someone
Yes.
understands a sliver of what you're going through.
Well, and what you're
that
feeling
gives
is
you hope in
normal.
some weird way. Yeah. Someone understands this. This is not the first time someone's ever been here, like in the course of humanity kind of thing. That does something to you in that moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so ministry of presence that was good presence, or those safe people, so helpful for me. And again, just I don't, if someone was in that situation, I'm probably not sending them verses. Probably not. That's a hard space.
99% of the time, that was not good. There is a very small amount that I do think it was helpful, but it was so few and far between. And yeah,
I felt the love of Christ way more through my brothers and sisters
Yeah.
than I did being thrown any kind of text.
and not that
Flesh that out. What do you mean?
So if you send me a text message with
Yeah.
a verse,
I understand that part of it.
but
like I wouldn't read them.
yeah,
Like I don't know where you came, but like people would send me stuff and I just see it was Bible verse. And I'm like, and I'm meeting with the Lord. Like in this season, I actually was doing, I will completely candidly doing a better time with the Lord each day. Like when we're in the hospital, every morning I have my blueberry muffin. This is the only good thing from the cafeteria, my coffee, and I would sit and meet with the Lord while Abram was like kind of doing his rest iPad time in the morning. And I will tell you, they're one of my sweetest times with the Lord. Like I'm not meeting with the Lord at this point, but for me, for some reason, it had to be there were very few people where I'm like, I'm going to read this verse. Cause I'm like, it was such a, I don't know, like when I met with the Lord, it was a very meaningful, purposeful time where I'm seeking him and he showed up like crazy. Like, and it was very sweet. There's some of my favorite memories, which is crazy because he's in the hospital. My son's there, but yet I will still say when people just send that, I'm like, there's just this thing in me that got irritated. And I was like, I'm not reading it. Like, cause I'm like, you're just trying to like and I just want to disclaim that was not their heart. I think people are very genuinely trying to help and don't know what to do.
I know
and so
that y'all would think that.
There was it wasn't even like a judgment towards them. It was just that where I was at, I knew my heart did not have space to feel like someone thinks this is going to make it a little bit better. Because that verse in itself was not necessarily going to make where I was at in that moment better.
And if you put, so if you put somebody in our shoes, like in it, but outside of it, or know it and like love you and want, like, golly, I mean, there's weight, there's love, there's like, God, how do we do this? How do we, and I love that you said that because there's like this, like, gosh, just if I'm sitting around and having that time by myself and pleading for Abram and pleading for y'all and begging the Lord for stuff and like hoping for stuff that y'all are hoping for. And it's like, I don't know what to do. I'll send a Bible verse. Right. And it goes so like, I even remember like, there's like, even the first couple of times me driving down the hospital, I don't cry a lot. I cried on the way down and I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm like, fuck, I'm like, where's the pastor at? Like, and the pastors were there. Like, I'm not trying to say where's the pastor. I like, no pastors, hey pastors. I'm just trying to say like, I'm like, golly, like what am I coming with? Like,
but it's your presence. You were there.
And then for us to just sit for like 45 minutes on the, Holland's got great stories about that encouraged me during all that and doing those things. But it's like that, like those things are not like for people to hear like, oh gosh, I probably shouldn't send it's like a weird thing.
Because I don't want to discourage like wanting to be there because presence was what was like, I mean, we talked about this.
But not everybody can be present.
No. And we talked about this on the last thing when those girls all came in. Like that was like the most, I just remember being like from so many different walks from like, I mean, home group to my Monday girls that I used to meet with. I mean, it was just crazy because it was presence. That was what I needed.
And it's what blew me off.
Certain people.
Yes.
For certain people. And that's what blew me off guard as far as like with like us sitting on the back porch and whether it's Tuesday or Thursday nights and us laughing at Charles Barkley, which is how it started with the NBA. It's like, we'd been friends for
forever, longer than us.
Decade.
Me and Jack.
And so like, I'm like, God, man, this is so hard for me. Like, I don't know how to love him. I don't know how to minister to him. I don't know how to care for him. I don't know how to, my heart's breaking too.
But you showed up.
Well, but then like here's the biggest thing I learned through all that is like, there was some nights that we would just drink bourbon and laugh at Charles Barkley and it was sweet. And then there were some nights that like Charles was saying the same funny stuff because Chuck is Chuck. But then you didn't want to listen to Chuck.
Yeah.
You wanted to talk and you wanted to say things. And I didn't have to have answers and I didn't have to say anything, but you did it. And then we did that for months.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until we did that for months that you were like, hey, this was one of the things that like, I've got to do. And I'm like, it blew me away because I was like, this is one of the things that I've got to do because I'm in it with you. It makes me feel like, and then all of a sudden it's like, God, I didn't even think, I thought it was more for me. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a, man, it's not that I was doing, so like to think like, I got to do something. Let me send a verse. Let me send a, which are good things. And I get where they're coming from, and they don't mean evil. They don't mean, but like it comes
and
from
they
a place
probably
of,
hit different people different. Specifically where Jack and I were at, like, I think that's a very fair disclaimer. Like, I think where we're at, it was not necessarily helpful for us.
It's true.
So
Yeah, I needed somewhere I could just be, and what we found out, and just for anybody listening that knows somebody in these circumstances, it's like you don't have to have the answers, because I know that there are no answers.
Yeah.
No answers.
So don't try
yes,
to give me an answer that doesn't exist.
yes.
Yep.
And
I think that's exactly what it is, though. Like, that was even like sometimes it felt like people were trying to make the verse the answer, or like this.
Sure.
Like whatever these text things or whatever they were, but there's no answer other than this just really sucks.
I know the Lord loves me.
Yes.
He loves my son, and my son has cancer and he's dying. And those are not, those are all true.
Yeah.
But they were really hard to figure out how those things could work together. And that was a whole different thing that we were on at the beginning of our journey of trying to figure out, how are all these things true?
Well, and in a lot of that too, what you're experiencing is that you're having to hold and embody those realities on a functional basis. Like that's your life, all those things being true. And other people, literally, that cannot be true for them. Like they cannot accept those realities. It doesn't fit within their world. But for you, it doesn't matter at this point. It is your world.
Yeah, me before Abram, I lived there. Like I've done all these things that, like, I've done all of that because I wanted to be whatever, like, for those people. But it is different when you've gone through it. And the same reason you were saying, like, when we talk to people that have gone through deep grief, like, it is such a different conversation than what you can have with anyone that hasn't. I mean, it's just different.
Yeah. And like I said, I would just advocate for, it's okay not to have the answer, because there is no answer. And anytime an answer was trying to be forced down our throat, that was where we really bucked, and we cut you out. I mean, it's how it went.
You did more so than me, but
I did, but
you feel that so deeply on the other end, because we know that like we're like, so I mean, me and my family were in it with you, but then like when y'all text us like something from the hospital or some news that you have or something that's going on, like there's no way to respond. There's just not. Like I would get some information from y'all and be like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want? I can't say anything. Like, I've got to respond. I have to respond. This is a reality.
Yeah.
I have to respond because you texted me, and I can't just be like 3 days later, be like, oh, yeah. I'm like, I have to respond. There is not a response.
Yeah, there's not. But I think for me, and it probably was maybe different. Like, I even just let people like, I love you. Like, there's not a response. Like, I didn't need.
No, that was
hands down the best. It's like, hey, either that sucks or I love you, or
really sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Like, I'm so sorry. Like, there's not.
Yeah.
Those were the best texts for me, because it was like, I just need to share this with you, and I don't need I don't know, like, I mean, like, yes, we absolutely wanted people to pray for us, and I appreciated the like praying for you text, but like,
sure,
it was helpful when they came with like hey, that really sucks, or hey, I love you. Like, I hate that this happened today. I hate that this is where you're at, because that's just the reality. Like, and that for me that's all I needed. Like, because I wouldn't, just knowing we're seen, knowing that our story is not just.
Yeah, you want to talk to people that are willing to, like, they have to be in it. And if they're trying to take you out of it, it feels like the most, because you're like, no, why would I leave this? My son's in it. Right. We're not leaving this kind of thing. So don't give me this or that, or try to pull me out of it to some other lofty kind of hope. Like, we're in it. He's here. And let's just talk about this kind of thing. And so it is interesting, like any kind of language or hopes or talk or prayers that kind of try to take you out of the suffering is almost disingenuous and unloving in that moment, right?
I would say it was helpful for me when I really struggle when people are like trying to say something along the lines of like, well, I hope the Lord heals him, or those things are hard. I'm like, like for me, it was like, I'm going to believe that Lord's going to do this until he says no. Like that was actually helpful. That was another weird thing where I wasn't, it wasn't until like really towards the end, it's like, oh, I pray for comfort, like things that were not necessarily about his healing. And I would get comments about that. That was really hard for me because I'm like, we said it on one of our other episodes of just, we're going to believe the Lord can heal him until he calls him home. Like that was absolutely where we lived. And I think that is a very healthy place to live because I believe our God is so much bigger than any medical thing on this earth. And I do believe he could have healed Abram. I believe he could heal another kid tomorrow. Like I think that God is still active in how he heals. And so for me to hear stuff that felt almost like someone else had already accepted that we weren't going to fight, that was really hard too. So I think even just saying stuff like, I'm going to believe for this until the Lord doesn't. And that's another thing I do use now, like when I'm talking to someone else that's in grief, because I'm like, I'm going to believe the Lord's going to do this because I believe our God still can. And that is a true statement of how I live and how what I really do believe.
Yeah. And so when I would send those text messages, I didn't want an answer.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to be, I'm telling you, I'm crushed.
Yep.
And I need you to know that I'm crushed. And I want you to be there with me or
Yeah.
be there for me, either one or both. So I wasn't ever looking for the answer. I just needed to communicate my world is falling apart, or I'm on the mountaintop. We got great news, and I need someone to celebrate with me. Or
Totally.
And we wanted that. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're like,
absolutely.
hey, like we celebrated, and we said that last time, but I love that we did that. We would celebrate everything that we could along the way because that's amazing for your sanity. Like, what else do you do?
Yeah. It's
You
hope.
celebrate the wins.
Yeah.
So you should tell the story of Jason calling, like you love that story of my self-care.
oh, yeah. Easily, pastor. I love this pastor forever now because of this.
This is a common now thing in our marriage.
He is a pastor.
Yeah, Jack tells me that often.
Yeah.
He's a pastor.
But this was months into what was going on, and Jason asked you, "Why are you doing your walks? Or have you taken a shower?" And you said no.
I'm a very honest person. I was not gonna lie. Like I'm like, I'll own my stuff. Like, yeah, I'm just not gonna. I was very blatant with him. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
So I didn't do it.
And
I wasn't feeling it.
He said, as lovingly as you possibly can, it's like, Ashley, sister, you are as stubborn as an old mule. And I'm like, preach, brother. I'm married to this woman.
Could you say that? What did you exactly say to her? Can you say it again?
So I'm being quiet, but I'm like,
You're like literally giddy. Like,
waving my hand, and I'm like, yeah, tell her, because
hey, I also married a very stubborn mule. Like that's just like, let's call it what it is.
We're talking about something else.
But just because not that I understood it probably to Jason's level, but I was.
Oh, he saw it though.
He was encouraging those self-care things, and
I was like, nope.
Ashley had a terribly difficult time doing them, and so I would encourage it, but it's just.
It was different when Jack. It was.
That's
I will say, as a husband in that role, if someone's there, like that was not.
When it comes across as
I don't need you for this.
I'm trying to fix you. That doesn't go too good.
Yeah.
That was hard to hear.
Did you go on a
from
walk?
him.
Did you shower today?
I think it's so fun
not
that
your
like
deal.
as simple
Yeah,
as they were, is like your dad hugging you, or you going to watching.
That's interesting.
The NBA.
Yeah.
I forget what do they call it? Whatever it is, or like showering and going on a walk is like
we had very different things.
When you're talking about like, I went on a walk and I put some earphones in, and like it's cool to listen. I mean, it's more than cool. It's so life-giving to listen to those things and to fight for them and do them. And then when you do them, you're like, okay, well now my cup's empty, and so now I can go back in and it can be filled up. Or however else you want to describe that, vice versa, right? It's like a
cup full.
It's cool. It's a cool. Yeah. I only say cup empty because you were like, oh my gosh, my cup would just get to where I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah, the
right?
other way.
That's how you started the whole conversation. And it's like, man, like to listen to those things and to fight for those things was huge and is huge.
I do think, like, I just want to touch on one thing specifically. Like, I think it was hard And I love hearing you talk about the stuff with your dad, because I think that's such a great example of you needing someone to carry it, because I think you had to carry a lot more than in that time when I was doing it, realized, because for me, I think the hardest thing that landed on you was that you were my safe place. Like ultimately, like yes, showers were good and stuff. Like you talk about self-care. For me, it was date nights. I mean, it was, and I will tell you, even on the side, like on this side of grief, having lost Abram, my number one thing, like I have deeply sweet, like relationships. I mean, y'all's wives, like great examples. But like at the end of the day, Jack for me is this place that's just safe. And so there is a weight that I don't think I ever even like processed during, of like what that looked like for you to not have somewhere else to go when I'm leaning so heavily on you. I just remember times when everything went bad and you just holding me. Like I remember the first time in March when we found out that it was the first time I think we had to sign a DNR, and they weren't sure that he's going to do great and make it through it because he was in so much pain after that one procedure. And they let you come to the hospital, which you hadn't been able to. And I just remember laying there, and I actually have a picture of it, of him just on this crappy air mattress, and he's just holding me. And I'm like I needed that. And yet I think it's very different for a man and a woman, and maybe not all relationships, and maybe that's specifically ours, but you were very safe for me and still are. And yet you're still carrying this other weight that you really need. And I think that's why our self-care looked different. Because for me, it was very like practical, down to earth things. And yet I think for you, it was like you needed these places to go that wasn't expecting you to carry the world, because your whole family was expecting you to carry the world.
That's a great point. Did you feel that?
Yeah, but I probably couldn't have said it.
Never.
Not then.
Yeah.
Too much.
But
It was instinctual.
I knew I needed it, or else I just wasn't going to make it. And I mean, one of the things I needed to do, like Ashley had no problem, like if she was worried or scared or needed to cry, like she had no problem doing that with me. But I never did that with her. So those times I'd be like by myself, usually driving to the hospital, and that was between me and the Lord, and I'm tears and I'm snot and I had to do those things, but I didn't, not that Ashley or the kids, that I didn't feel safe in that, but it just, I think it just, as the man and as the leader of the home, I didn't feel comfortable doing that and going to that place unless I was by myself.
Yeah. I think both of us did a lot of crying and driving, which I don't advocate necessarily for. It's probably not the world's safest thing.
I do a lot of that now.
I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did
really
a lot of crying and driving.
But just putting on a song or
Yep.
or queuing up some stuff that kind of takes you to that place and letting me be scared and tell the Lord, like, I'm scared and I need you, and don't take my son.
Yeah.
Let me fight for him. You know, just all these, I'm pleading, and I needed to do that, but it was hard for me to engage in that, you know, when we're in the bigger family context.
Yeah.